I'm pleased to be joined by Merlyn Holmes, a member of the Kilgore City Council, by Donnelly County Judge John Howard, by Real County Judge Bella Rubio, and by Anthony Williams, the mayor of Abilene. Welcome to you all. Thanks so much for being here. I want to begin by asking, in a kind of broad way, each of you to say what is the biggest issue in your community, understanding that if you've seen one rural community in Texas, you've seen one rural community in Texas, right? All these communities are not the same, and you all come from different places in different parts of the state. But obviously, even if Donnelly County is not the same as Real County or Kilgore is not the same as Abilene, there probably are things that you're dealing with that have some application to other rural communities. Councilmember Holmes, let me start with you. If you had to name one issue that you would say that is the biggest one that Kilgore deals with, what would that be?
We have so many. I think at this time and place right now would be broadband, right? Because we are in a rural area, and because of COVID and our students being taught from home, and all of our students are a little bit of everywhere. We just need better broadband. And I know that the state is working on that, but it's just not enough.
Right. And this has been a problem, council member, for your community and other communities in rural Texas for some time, right?
Yes.
But the pandemic has probably made it a bit more visible as an issue because, as you say, whether it's K-12 or I know you work at Kilgore College, right? You understand that at the higher ed level, it's a problem as well. People are being told take classes remotely. And of course, healthcare is now increasingly depending upon broadband to provide telemedicine to communities that don't have access to providers. Isn't that right?
Yes, it's huge. And we have students that have no access whatsoever, and they're having to drive just to sit in our parking lots to be able to get their homework done, and it's just huge. And we've got to come to some type of, I don't know, it's just, we've got to, and it's got to be done soon, because with our students, the longer COVID lasts, the longer our students are getting behind.
Right. Mayor Williams, I want to come back to you and ask you for an Abilene specific issue, but what you're hearing from Councilmember Holmes surely sounds familiar, right? Whether it's Kilgore or Abilene, broadband access is a problem.
Oh, significantly for all rural Texas. And so I definitely concur with that. Also would say, economic viability, the growth that's talked about in the state doesn't occur in rural Texas. Right. And so what the pandemic has done is really exaggerate the need to prove ourselves economically that we can be viable.
Yeah. And broadband is presumably, Mayor, a part of that, because if businesses are going to start up or relocate to your part of the state, there's got to be access to broadband for all the reasons that people go into business, right?
Yes. And I mean, broadband has come a fundamental utility to business. An absence of broadband limits your ability to recruit and retain as your local businesses grow. And so that's a significant issue for all of rural Texas.
Right. Now, you were just reelected as mayor of Abilene, but you served on the council, did you not, before that?
Yeah, so I've been on Abilene City Council for 20 years, or almost 20 years.
You've been at this a long time, so presumably you've seen this issue for a long time, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And is there anything that the local community can do about this on its own? Or I know Councilmember Holmes alluded to possibly the state getting involved and providing some kind of relief here. Whose responsibility is it to fix this?
Well, I would love to see the state make an investment in rural Texas and just equipping us so we can contribute to what I think is a significant economy worldwide. The more viable we are, the more viable Texas is, and the more the whole state grows. And so I would love our representation, not just in West Texas and rural Texas, but for all of us in the state to see that if given resources and tools, we can contribute to the state's economy.
Right. Judge Rubio, let me ask you if the same thing is the case in Real County. Economic development, top of mind there. I assume broadband must be as well, but to the mayor's point, those two things being related, you're feeling some of that there in Real County?
100%. So we have one internet provider. Yeah. And we are just now, they are just now in the transition of providing with fiber optic.
Wow.
And so we are so rural and big and square mileage that many areas, depending on what area you are in Rial County, you don't even have cell phone service.
Wow.
So it has been a challenge for both of our school districts.
Right.
And we are a tourist-based economy, Rial County, because our assets, our prized assets, are the Frio River and the Nueces River. And so some of our businesses had to close down, or some that were recently purchased had to, they just had, the owners just had to let them go back. So it's been very challenging in all aspects for our students, for their parents, for our business owners, and healthcare too, because we rely on 2 small clinics. Our nearest hospital is an 80-mile round trip.
Right. Judge Howard, this all sounding familiar to you up in Donley County? Obviously, the Panhandle during the pandemic has had its share of troubles dealing with the coronavirus. But just generally speaking, you know, if you're living in a place like Donley County, you may have, to Judge Rubio's point, you know, limited service, or you may be behind other communities in terms of how wired you are. Tell us about the landscape there, and what other big issue might be on your radar screen.
Well, first, thanks for having me, Evan. It's a pleasure to be here and join my other colleagues in local government. I would like to echo what I've heard already. Connectivity and broadband access is a particular challenge when you have the population densities that we have in West Texas. By the way, we're not a rural county, we're a frontier county. We have a particular category of rural out here in West Texas. And the population densities make it commercially non-viable for companies to come in and provide the broadband access, and even, yes, the cellular coverage in some areas of the state. But in addition to that, one concern I have in West Texas is with regard to water. We're heavily dependent on the Ogallala aquifer, and the Water Development Board's plan is to have 50% of that aquifer available to us in 2050. No water, no population.
Right. Do you think, Judge Howard, that the decline in population in rural parts of Texas, look, we know that Texas is rapidly becoming an urban state, but there are still 3 million people, say, in rural Texas, which is more than the population of like 18 states. There are still a lot of people living in rural Texas. But to the degree that people are leaving rural Texas to go to either the suburbs or even to go to the big cities, is it lack of access to things like water or lack of connectivity that is giving you a harder time keeping people in Donley County?
Evan, I think it's jobs. And, you know, I've looked at Donley County. We've lost over the last decade probably 200 people, from 3,600 to 3,400. But over the past century, we've lost a number of job opportunities. We used to have 16 schools in Donley County, and they were clustered around a number of smaller family farms. The smaller family farm has given way to larger concerns, and I'm sure the economies of scale and technology have made farms bigger and bigger. So Donley County is still an agrarian economy. We have farming and ranching. We have no minerals. We have no manufacturing, and the jobs are clustered really around our small community college and our ISDs. And other than that, my clinic is one of the largest employers in the county.
Right. Yeah, you are a doctor, and I want to come back to that because I want to ask you about rural healthcare for in a second. But I want to go to Councilmember Holmes and ask if you experience the same thing in your community. That is, that the opportunities for people to work or to start businesses maybe are limited by things that are particular to rural Texas or to your part of the state. And the result of that is that you don't see the kind of population persistence over time. Maybe you're losing people to other places.
Yes, I really do. And another thing besides broadband that I was going to say is our decaying infrastructure. And I believe all of rural Texas is going through the very same thing. Our roads, our water, our sewer. And that in itself, with us not being able to put the dollars in that we need to or would like to, that affects those people, those companies coming in, because we've got to have those three things in place before another company comes, wants to move to Kilgore or our East Texas area. We've got to have those in place and ready to go. But with that, it's not like it was 40 years ago where we got assistance to take care of a lot of those kind of things. And many rural areas have let it go. And we're in the middle of decay. And I believe a lot of East Texas and a lot of Texas are in the same boat as we are.
And you don't have dollars in the city budget, council member, that are available to be spent. Maybe you wouldn't have those dollars in large enough numbers anyway.
Yes, and we do have those dollars, but you're correct. We just don't have the number, the dollars that are needed in order to get to that point to actually bring in new people. And our Kilgore Economic Development Organization or department, they're doing a fabulous job. They are an award-winning group, and we're very diversified as far as Kilgore is, but that's lacking in our area.
How big is Kilgore right now? I heard Judge Howard obviously talked about Donley County being 3,800. I know that there are many more than 3,800 in Kilgore, but how big is the community?
We're about 15,000 during the day. And during the day, we go up to about 30,000, because people come in from all the other small communities to either work or go to school. But it's about 15,000.
Judge Rubio, how big is Real County? And second question is, do you feel the same pressure on infrastructure needs investment that you'd like to make, but maybe don't have the resources to invest in, as you hear from Councilmember Holmes?
Sure. So our population, according to the last census, is 3,300.
So even smaller than Donley County.
Yeah. We're sitting at 3,300. As I said, we have 2 ISDs in the whole county.
Right.
1 charter school. For industry for us to be an attractive county to industry, it would be rather difficult because of our location.
Right.
But as I've said, they are implementing. The city of Leakey is implementing a sewer system as we speak.
Right.
So we hope that might help reopen some businesses. They didn't close because of the pandemic. Just people have come and tried to open up little restaurants or little grocery stores, and just did not have the resources and the support to keep them open.
Right. And of course, given the fact that it's a relatively small county population-wise, there's not much of a customer base to try to attract people, right?
Customer base or workforce.
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 Right, workforce is a big one. Now, Mayor Williams, you were, relatively speaking, Abilene's a big city compared to what we're talking about on this call, right?
Well, 125,000, and the county's about 140,000, so a little bit bigger.
The upper end of rural, right?
Yes. Yeah. One thing that Judge Howard talked about is one thing that's very, very notable in regards to water. West Texas is the food, the fuel, the fiber of this country. Right. And so West Texans have invested about $1 billion over the last decade in water security. Water is top of the list and churns everything for us. And so the cities of Midland, Abilene, and San Angelo just embarked on a 10-year conversation about water security. And we have enough water for West Texas, for our communities, for the next 50 to 70 years. That is a mouthful right there, and that's a decade of work. But we think that will provide an opportunity for us to make our community viable economically speaking.
Is that something, Mayor, that you took responsibility for yourself? Of course, a number of years ago at this point, we had a state water plan that passed the legislature. We had to create a mechanism that the voters had to approve at the ballot box to fund this water infrastructure fund. It was a revolving loan fund. Did the state come in and help you, or is this something that you took responsibility for yourself?
Well, my predecessor, Mayor Archibald, initiated the conversation with those aforementioned cities, Midland and San Angelo.
Right.
And we kind of brought it home. But it was a very, very significant partnership for us. And having said that, the cities of Lubbock and Amarillo and Midland, Odessa and San Angelo, Abilene, we have quarterly conversations because we recognize, there are more representation in regards to state reps in Harris County than all of West Texas. And so we have a constant conversation about working with each other. Because we see a win for Midland, that's a win for Amarillo, that's a win for San Angelo.
So you actually work collaboratively. This is something I wanted to ask all of you later. This was a question that came in from one of our readers, said, I wonder the degree to which rural communities, if they're not able to deal with issues on their own, are working together collaboratively with like cities or with people in their region to try to solve problems. Mayor, it sounds like you're doing that.
Yeah, and it's not just social gatherings. There are workshops and hard conversations had. And so Ginger Nelson, the mayor of Amarillo, and Dan Pope in Lubbock have led that effort. But we try to even present our legislative agendas to be like-minded. And we'll select, like we all got on board and select and support Amarillo in its effort to get a vet clinic for Texas Tech in Canyon, just south of Amarillo, because we saw it's good for all of us.
Right. Councilmember Holmes, I know, having been out to Kilgore College, wonderful institution, iconic, that Kilgore is part of a family of communities, right? Longview and Tyler, and there's a whole bunch of places out there that are probably in a similar place where they can band together, strengthen numbers, right, and present a common agenda in Austin, but also just work together to solve some of these workaday problems.
Yes, and we do that not only with the college here, with other colleges, but we also do it as a city. And then we also work with the area college from a city standpoint with the area colleges and schools as well. But I feel like we have to do that. We have to stand together and work together in order for us all to be viable and succeed.
Yeah. Councilmember Holmes, let me stay with you because as I say, you work at Kilgore College. That's kind of your secret identity, right? The council member part of you is the superhero, and then the Kilgore College employee is kind of the secret identity.
I love that.
I want to ask you about educational opportunities in each of your communities, because obviously public education and higher education are two things that are important to the members of your community. This is one of the things that every rural community has in common. The ISDs matter, the community colleges matter. Setting the table of opportunity for everybody matters. What are the big challenges that you see, council member, in your community in Kilgore on the education front that are particular to rural communities that you would like some relief on or help on?
Besides the broadband, that is a huge one.
Right, that's the first one.
Yeah, that is number one. And then homelessness. You don't think about college students being homeless, but we have some homelessness. And then we also, that is a huge thing. I think that just medical for those students. And I think that in rural America or in Texas, we just have a big problem with our health care, because a lot of us are losing our hospitals. And then once you lose a hospital, you start losing the doctors. Well, those students are coming from everywhere. We get students from everywhere. And then when we get them here, it makes it very hard when we don't have local medical to take care of those students. We just have a lot of different areas that, that it's different than from a community college, let's say in Houston.
Is your sense, Councilmember, then I want to go to Judge Howard, is your sense that the state is providing you adequate resources to educate kids, whether on public ed? We had a big school finance reform bill that passed in the last legislative session. It remains to be seen if they're going to be able to do the full thing that they did last time in the next 2-year budget. But obviously that was intended to provide resources across the board to every school district to increase teacher salaries and to pay for full day pre-kindergarten. Are you getting enough money from the state, do you think, to invest in K-12 and even on the higher ed side?
I think that we never get enough money. I think that we're always needing more funds, but
right.
Within these last several years, I mean, I would say the last 5 years, it seems like the money is getting cut more. We're always looking where we're going to be at the beginning of the school year. So no, I think that that needs to be looked at very strongly. We need more.
Judge Howard, in a place like Donnelly County, I assume that the ISD is kind of like the public square, right? It touches everybody's lives.
Yeah.
It matters, right?
It does. It does. I was just thinking about a little obelisk out in our courthouse square that has 4 faces, and on those are farming, ranching, schools, and churches.
Yeah.
The values of rural Texas and an integral part of rural Texas. Schools are an integral part of rural Texas. And we have, Evan, as I'm sure other communities are challenged, we have a limited tax base,
right.
A declining population, no minerals, no industry, no manufacturing, and it's impossible to put an increasing burden on a limited number of people.
Right.
So I've heard talk about the legislature considering a penny of sales tax and dedicating that to education. We have a little community college here as well. It's over 100 years old and very important in our community. Clarendon College has been here for a long time.
In fact, you were a regent, were you not previously at that school?
I was in a former life. Before
right.
I was elected to serve in the courthouse.
Yeah.
With 3,400 people in the county, you need to serve somewhere. There's
right.
a limited pool of people to do things, and yes, I was. And the college is an integral part of our community and provides a substantial economic impact in our community as well.
And I'm sure that it's also one of the larger employers, right, in the community.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah. Judge Rubio, same thing down your way, that the ISD is important because it gives kids opportunity to maybe advance in life, but also it's a big workforce provider as well, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things about both of our ISDs, because our closest community college is an 80-mile round trip, they do have dual credit programs.
Oh, good.
In both school districts that have been very advantageous. One of our school districts, it's located here in our county seat, because of the school district being deemed as a rich school district, they get caught up in the Robin Hood plan.
Right.
So they have to send a lot of money back to the state.
Yeah.
And so it's been very challenging for them. Very challenging to be able to have an attractive pay scale for your science and your math teachers to come and move here. And unless they're married to another teacher, their spouses don't have employment here.
Right. So so one of the challenges that I think is probably, again, not unique to your community, but to rural Texas, is how do you attract the kind of talent that in turn is the very best for the ISDs or the community colleges to then provide your other residents the kinds of educational opportunities that you'd like?
Yes, and currently, I must say that Real County, for one of our ISDs, there have been some gentlemen that have formed a foundation to try to address some of these, and they have felt the need to invest in the children's education in our community.
Right. Mayor Williams, again, you're in a larger city, so you maybe have challenges that are a little bit different than the others on this call. But the fact is, we know that rural public education has its own set of challenges, and that always feels underappreciated, undervalued, underfunded. And I assume that if you ladder that up to higher ed, there's a version of that conversation as well. Talk to us about education in Abilene.
Yes, certainly. And what we've done, our community's made just a commitment via bonds for K through 12. So in the last 4 years, We have 2 school districts in the city of Abilene. The voters have approved $185 million for our schools.
Wow.
Additionally, we raised an additional $12 million to match with some funds from TSDC and have a brand new TSDC here in Abilene. Part of the larger school districts initiative was a $38 million initiative for career tech. So that element within our high school. And so we've done a pretty good job in our community of reaching even past Abilene and Taylor County to identify other partners within our educational district and trying to really equip our students so we have enough workforce so we can grow our economy via additional private sector investment.
So, and you actually have arrows in your quiver that probably Judge Howard and Judge Rubio certainly don't have. When you're talking about, $100 million plus bond opportunities, I think Donnelly County and Real County, that's not going to work for them, right? Yeah. Mayor Williams, is the tax base sufficient to the task here in your community? And are the residents of your community, your county, not just your city, willing to consider paying more? I mean, Judge Howard talked about the limits that he has in terms of what he can access from taxes. Do you have any more latitude?
Well, I'll say this, I would argue that Abilene, Texas is, if not the second most conservative city in the state.
Sure.
And so if you think about our school districts, our voters went to the polls and approved $185 million in bonds. Additionally, the city asked for $80 million for infrastructure and other issues. Yeah. And so I think part of that is that we've had good dialogue, a good conversation, and for the most part, the trust of those we represent in supporting Abilene and Taylor County. What our job now is to try to grow our economy via industry. Now, Abilene had an opportunity the last 3 years to have growth of about $600 million in regards to our economy prior to COVID-19. And so we're continuing to try that endeavor.
So you're actually willing to sell your community on the need to invest because it will have long-term benefits, of course, right? That's what everybody in a job like yours does. And, Judge Howard, Councilmember Holmes, Judge Rubio, being in rural Texas means that you probably have, like Mayor Williams is saying, conservative, small c conservative constituents who are probably not really psyched about paying taxes. So that's a challenge, Councilmember Holmes, right? If you want to go to the community and say, well, look, good news, we want to invest more in X or Y, we're going to raise your taxes, you're probably going to be told not so politely, no, thank you.
Especially now because of COVID, we have so many people out of jobs right now, and with oil price going down because we're like an oil field town. We're trying to diversify as best as we can, but we're still an oil field town. Right. And with the price of oil as it is now, a lot of people are out of work and they don't want their taxes raised.
Right. But of course, Judge Howard, the problem there is that you don't get money from constituents because they don't have it and they don't want to pay it. And the state is parsimonious in the way that it supports local communities to the extent that it can be because it has a finite budget like everybody else. You guys are between a rock and a hard place, aren't you? Can't look left, can't look right.
That's putting it pretty softly. Donnelly County is probably by many measures among the bottom 5 of 254 counties in Texas as far as the tax base, the per capita income, and salaries reflect that. Yeah. So there are limits to what we can ask the taxpayer to do.
Yeah. And COVID, to Councilmember Holmes' point, COVID has not helped, certainly, right? The economic downturn that has come along with the pandemic these last 8 months, if anything, it's got to make your economic situation more precarious, Judge, right?
For us, actually, it hasn't had that large an impact. We haven't had the impact of a lot of people for working at home. Much of Donnelly County is essential. Yeah. It's either agriculture or ranching or businesses that support agriculture and ranching, and we've had very few closures.
Didn't have to shut the county down.
No, we didn't. Yeah.
Let me ask you about, speaking of the coronavirus, let me ask you about rural healthcare or healthcare in your community. Again, I mentioned that you're a doctor in addition to being the judge, and you attracted some notice early in the pandemic for how you approached the question of testing. You wanted to get out in front of this, and you were celebrated for the way that you approached it. You told me before we got on today that, like every other community in the Panhandle at the moment, you're dealing with a resurgence of this pandemic. Does the healthcare infrastructure in your community or in your region feel particularly challenged? We know that Texas has, for the last decade, had more rural hospital closures than any other state. So it was an issue before this. Tell me how it is now, Judge.
We haven't had a hospital in Donley County. I came here 21 years ago, specifically because there was no provider in the county. And in about a 6,000 square mile area, I'm the only one, the only physician practicing.
Goodness.
I came here with the specific idea to create what is now called medical homes, but we've been doing that for 21 years here, and integrating care across the spectrum, including very good emergency management and transportation to tertiary care medical centers is what you have to do when you find sparsely populated large areas. I could probably talk about this for 2 or 3 hours, and I'm not gonna do that to you.
But your challenges are obviously unique to your county. I mean, I'll ask Judge Rubio, do you also have a hospital, or unlike Donley County, do you have a hospital in Real County? How is the healthcare situation down there?
So we do not have a hospital. Our closest hospital is an 80-mile round trip. We have 2 small health clinics that are totally based on federal funding. And so they have a hard time. It's been very challenging for them to keep a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, much less a doctor, when you can't give them a contract, but because of year-to-year funding.
Right.
And so
there's an economics piece of it as well as a healthcare piece of it.
Absolutely. Like when people do move to Real County, when they retire, say at 62 to 65 years of age, we keep them maybe 10 years before they move on to a bigger county or back near where their children are for healthcare needs.
Right.
Because our bigger hospital is a 150-mile round trip.
Wow. Mayor Williams, how has the coronavirus affected Abilene and your counties, county out there? Obviously it doesn't know geographic boundaries. The virus it affects everybody. I'm just wondering what you've found in the last 8 months.
So prior to COVID-19 in January, we had less than 1,000 of our neighbors who were unemployed. In June, that rose to over 10,000 in our community and around 15,000 within the reporting area. And today we're around 8,000. And so it's had a devastating effect on our community. And we're still trying to rebound. We're trying to be considerate of the health issues that COVID-19 presents. But at the same time, we don't want the cure to be worse than the disease.
Right.
And it's a balance.
So did you have to shut down parts of your community, Mayor, during the height of the pandemic? I know that's a controversial political issue in many places in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, we were consistent with the governor's order, and we responded appropriately. But COVID-19 has been devastating for Abilene and the surrounding communities.
Got it. Councilmember Holmes, let me ask the last question of you, and then I'm going to go to the judges and to the mayor and ask them as well as we wrap up here. Legislature comes into Austin in January, second week of January. We're going to have them for 5 months. We don't know what kind of a session it's going to be, but we know they are going to have to work and get at some of the problems that we're facing, challenges as a state. If you had the ability to get them to focus on one thing next year that would benefit Kilgore, what would it be? You get to lobby them right now through this conversation. What would that one thing be?
That is hard. You've got to give me more than one. And and of course, I've just been broadband to death. But the other thing, I think the other one is no more unfunded or additional mandates on our city. You know, we kind of know what we need to do for our city.
Right.
Don't put things that are impossible or that are not what we need. You know, you can't ask us to do things such as Houston, but I'm going to go back to broadband. That is one of our biggest things.
I appreciate you bringing up the relationship you have with the state. You know, we ought to have like an old game show. Whenever somebody says local control, a duck comes down, because that for local officials is really a pretty significant issue. Judge Rubio, what would be your one thing before the legislature if you could wave your wand?
Well, I concur with Councilman Holmes. Unfunded mandates.
Unfunded mandates.
Yes, unfunded mandates can just be devastating on a small tax-based county.
Right. So you just want to be left to run your thing. Government is best, closest to those governed. Let us do our deal. Right.
Or basically, if you're going to mandate us to do something, then give us the budget, give us the funds to be able to adhere to those mandates.
Right. Show us how important it is by making a statement with your budget. I get that. Judge Howard, what's the one thing most important to you that you'd be willing to talk to your members of the legislature about?
I like the way you put that. Government is best, serves the people at a level that is closer to the people.
Right.
When the legislature endeavors to fashion a solution to big city problems without regard to how it affects rural Texas, there are unintended consequences. When they create a mandate for everyone to do something, and there's an attempt to solve a problem that we really don't have. But if you're going to require us to do something that will inevitably result in the expenditure of funds, which we don't have, give us the money.
Sure. Mayor Williams, this is obviously something that affects communities big and small in rural Texas. The idea that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. 254 counties, very different needs, very different resources to tap.
Yes, and so I agree with everything that's been said, but I'll also add transportation dollars.
Okay.
We have infrastructure issue across the country, and certainly in West Texas, where again we're the food, the fuel, the fiber of this country. You know, if you look at far West Texas and the Permian Basin, that has 4% of the population, but double digits in regards to fatalities on the highways and byways. And as we look at category 2 and 5 in regards to TxDOT funding, we want some consideration. There is going to be battle that's fought for those dollars. Those urbanized areas have congestion issues and are fighting for those dollars. But we need that money for West Texas if we're indeed supposed to deliver using transportation.
Well, it's a little bit like what we talked about earlier. You know, you have a rapidly urbanizing state, and typically the dollars follow the population. But the reality is there are still a lot of people in your community, right? And they need to be served. And what you said earlier is true. What starts in rural Texas affects the rest of the state, does it not?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and all of us in rural Texas, we want to partner with our brethren across the state. Yeah. And if given the resources and tools, we can do a better job of making our own unique contribution to the state's economy.
Well, I think that's a very hopeful point to end on. Mayor Williams, thank you. Judge Howard, thank you. Judge Rubio, thank you. And Councilmember Holmes, appreciate so much that you joined us for this conversation. To everybody watching, thank you so much for dialing us up, not just today, but all week long. If you enjoyed what you saw and you believe in the public service mission of the Texas Tribune, I'd be crazy not to encourage you to become a member at texastribune.org/join. We will have more great virtual events coming up soon. Keep an eye on our website for news about those. Everybody stay safe. We'll see you soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.